You do not truly know your family until they try to claim the life you built. The moment my mother told me she handed my apartment keys to my cousin, like she was passing salt across a dinner table, I realized I had spent 34 years mistaking obligation for love. This time I refused to swallow my anger and smile. I was ready to burn the script they wrote for me and finally write my own. My name is Leah Martin, and for the first time in 6 months, I could not hear the hum of the server room or the incessant ringing of the phones at Northgate Transport. At 34 years old, I had spent the last decade climbing a ladder that my family refused to acknowledge even existed. To the corporate world, I was the senior financial manager for a logistics firm that moved freight across 3 continents. To my mother and father, I was a girl who played on a computer all day and occasionally did freelance work that they assumed paid me in exposure and pocket change. They preferred their version of the truth because it made asking me for favors significantly easier. If I had a real job, I would have boundaries. If I was just floating through life, my time and my resources were communal property. I lay on a teak lounge chair that likely cost more than my first car, looking out at the turquoise expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The resort in Cabo was the kind of place where the staff knew your drink order before you sat down and the towels smelled like lavender and money. I had paid for this entirely out of my bonus from the third quarter. I had worked 70 hours a week for 3 months straight to secure the Southeast Asian distribution contract, and this week was supposed to be my reward. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The sun was heavy and warm on my skin, melting away the knot of tension that lived permanently between my shoulder blades. I reached for my iced mineral water, watching the condensation drip down the glass, and took a long, slow breath. Then the phone buzzed. It was not a ring. I had silenced the ringer before I even boarded the plane in Chicago. It was a violent vibration against the hard wood of the side table, a sound like an angry hornet trapped under a jar. I kept my eyes on the horizon, determined to ignore it. I told myself it was probably work, perhaps a crisis with the customs paperwork in Singapore. But I knew better. I had engaged the out-of-office response. My team knew better than to call unless the building was literally burning down. The buzzing stopped. I exhaled. 5 seconds later, it started again. I turned my head slowly, feeling the muscles in my neck protest the movement. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken years ago. It was my mother, smiling a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Above her face, the text read, "Mom." I watched the call time out. Immediately, another call came through. Aunt Janice. I ignored that one too. Then came a text message preview that flashed across the screen. It was from Savannah. My cousin. "Are you going to answer, or are you going to be a bitch about this?" My stomach turned over. The peace of the ocean vanished, replaced instantly by the familiar, suffocating weight of familial obligation. This was the pattern. They did not call to check on me. They called in a swarm, a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm my defenses until I said yes to whatever demand they were currently concocting. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the chair. The heat suddenly felt oppressive rather than comforting. I grabbed the phone. If I did not answer, they would call the hotel front desk. They had done it before. I swiped the green icon and held the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I did not ask how they were. I knew the rules of engagement. "I am in another country," I said, my voice flat. "This costs $3 a minute. Don't you start with the money talk. Leah." My mother's voice was crystal clear, cutting through the sound of the ocean waves like a serrated knife. She sounded frantic, but there was an undercurrent of triumph in her tone, the sound of someone who has already made a decision and is merely informing the subordinates. "We have been trying to call you for an hour. Savannah is crying her eyes out here. I am on vacation." "Mom," I said, rubbing my temple. "I told you this. I sent you the itinerary. I am not working. I am not available to fix Savannah's car or edit her resume or loan her $500 because she spent her rent money on a festival ticket. Whatever it is, it can wait until next Monday." "It cannot wait," my mother snapped. "And stop being so selfish. This is an emergency. Savannah was evicted." I closed my eyes. Of course she was. Savannah was 27 years old and had lived in 6 different apartments in the last 4 years. It was never her fault. The landlord was crazy, or the roommates were messy, or the neighborhood was too loud. It was never because she refused to pay rent on time or played music until 4 in the morning. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it only in the abstract sense that I was sorry for anyone who had to deal with the consequences of their own actions. "But I am 2,000 miles away. I cannot help her move." "We know you are away," my mother said. Her voice dropped an octave, shifting from frantic to authoritative. This was the voice she used when she was correcting my posture at dinner parties. "That is actually why this works out so perfectly. You are not using your apartment right now." The silence that followed was heavy. The air around me seemed to stand still. A seagull cried out overhead, a sharp, mocking sound. "Excuse me," I asked. "I said you are not using the apartment," she repeated, speaking slower, as if I were a slow child who needed help understanding basic concepts. "It is just sitting there empty, Leah, and Savannah needs a place to go immediately. The landlord put her things on the curb. It is humiliating. We could not just leave her there." "So she is staying with you?" I asked, though the sinking feeling in my gut told me the answer before she spoke. "Don't be ridiculous," my mother scoffed. "Your father and I are turning the guest room into a craft room. We don't have the space for all of Savannah's boxes. Besides, you have that second bedroom that you insist on calling an office. It is perfect for her." My hand gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. "Mom, no, absolutely not. I am not there. I cannot let her in. I have sensitive work documents in my office. My privacy." "Oh, stop it," she interrupted. "You act like you are guarding state secrets. It is just a laptop, Leah. And the problem is already solved." "What do you mean? The problem is already solved?" "I gave her the key," my mother said. The words landed like a physical blow to the chest. I stopped breathing for a second. The world tilted slightly on its axis. "You did what?" My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "I gave her the key," she said again, louder this time, defensive. "The spare key you gave me for emergencies. This is an emergency. Leah, family is in crisis. I drove over to the complex. I let her in, and the movers are bringing her things up right now. You should be happy you can help your cousin in her time of need instead of interrogating me." I stood up. I walked to the edge of the balcony, gripping the railing. My apartment, my sanctuary. The one place in the world where I did not have to be Leah the fixer, Leah the wallet, or Leah the disappointment. I had bought that condo 3 years ago. I had fought tooth and nail for the down payment, saving every cent, eating ramen noodles and working overtime until my eyes burned. It was pristine. It was quiet. It was mine. And now, Savannah was there. I could picture it vividly. Savannah, who left wet towels on hardwood floors. Savannah, who smoked vaguely illegal things inside despite promises to go to the balcony. Savannah, who believed that what was yours was hers, and what was hers was also hers. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "you have to get her out. Now. You do not have the right to do that. That key was for if I had a heart attack or the pipes burst. It was not for you to move someone in without my permission." "You are being dramatic," she said dismissively. "She is family. She just needs a place to land for a few months until she gets back on her feet." "A few months," I choked out. "You said she was moving in." "Well, she can't live on the street. Leah." My God, where is your compassion? Then, a new voice rumbled through the speaker. It was my father. He must have been listening on the other line or standing right next to her. "Leah," he said. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man who believed his logic was unassailable. "Listen to your mother. You are in Mexico drinking fancy cocktails. You are not even using the house. It is a waste of space to have it sit empty when Savannah is in trouble. We raised you to share. Don't be greedy. It is just a few square feet of space." "It is my home, Dad," I said, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of pure, hot frustration. I pay the mortgage. I pay the insurance. I pay the HOA fees. You cannot just move people into my house while I'm out of the country. We already did, he said simply. It is done. Savannah is unpacking. She promised to be neat. She will water your plants. Consider it a house-sitting arrangement. You should be thanking us for finding someone to watch the place while you are gone. I have a security system, I argued, though I knew logic was useless against them. I don't need a house sitter. Leah, enough, my mother snapped, regaining control of the conversation. We are not discussing this anymore. It is done. Savannah is family. You have plenty of room, and you have plenty of money. Stop being so petty. We will talk when you get back next week. Maybe by then, you will have found your heart. Mom, if she is not out by— I am hanging up now, she said. The movers are asking where to put the couch. I told them to put it in the living room, next to yours. It will be cozy. Enjoy your vacation. Leah, try to relax. The line went dead. I stood there on the balcony, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to the silence. The ocean roared below, crashing against the rocks, oblivious to the fact that my life had just been commandeered. They had done it. They had actually done it. I lowered the phone and looked at the screen. The call had lasted 3 minutes and 45 seconds. In less than 4 minutes, they had violated the one boundary I thought was absolute. They had not asked. They had not negotiated. They had simply taken. Because in their minds, I did not exist as a separate entity. I was an extension of the family unit, a resource to be harvested when the preferred crop Savannah failed to yield. I looked back at my lounge chair. The ice in my water had melted. The condensation had pooled on the table. My first instinct was to scream. I wanted to throw the phone into the ocean. I wanted to fly home and scream until my throat bled. I wanted to physically drag Savannah and her boxes out of my apartment. But then, a cold clarity washed over me. It was colder than the drink, colder than the air conditioning in the server room at Northgate. Screaming was what Savannah did. Screaming was emotional. Screaming signaled that I was hurt, that I was begging them to understand me, to respect me. They did not respect me. They never would. If I screamed, I was the hysterical daughter throwing a tantrum. If I flew home and caused a scene, I was the unstable one. They would bond over my craziness. They would tell the rest of the family how ungrateful I was. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the salty air. My father was right about one thing. I was a financial manager. My entire career was built on risk assessment, asset protection, and contract enforcement. I dealt with logistics. I dealt with facts. I dealt with hard numbers and legal realities. They thought they were dealing with Leah, the pushover daughter who did freelance data entry. They had forgotten that Leah Martin managed multi-million-dollar accounts and specialized in hostile takeovers. I looked at the phone again. I did not call back. I did not text Savannah a string of expletives. Instead, I unlocked the screen and opened my banking app. I checked my balance. I opened my email and found the lease agreement I had signed 3 years ago, the one that explicitly stated the rules regarding unauthorized tenants and key duplication. I walked back to the lounge chair and sat down. I picked up my water and took a sip. It was watered down, but it still tasted sharp. Okay, I whispered to the empty air. You want to play house? I opened the contact list on my phone. I did not scroll to Mom or Dad. I scrolled past Aunt Janice. I found the number for Mrs. Callahan. Mrs. Callahan was the president of my condo association. She was 68 years old, a retired police dispatcher, and she ran the building with the efficiency of a maximum security prison warden. She had once fined a neighbor $50 for leaving a pair of muddy boots in the hallway for 20 minutes. She knew everything that happened in the building. She knew every car, every face, and every rule in the handbook by heart. And she hated Savannah. She had met Savannah once, 2 years ago, when my cousin had visited and parked her car in Mrs. Callahan's assigned spot because it was closer to the door. Mrs. Callahan had nearly had the car towed then. I looked at the time. It was 4 in the afternoon in Chicago. Mrs. Callahan would be home. She would likely be watching the security monitors. I pressed the call button. My family thought they had made a decision for me. They thought the conversation was over because they had hung up the phone. They thought possession was 9/10 of the law and that guilt was the other 1/10. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson in property law. I waited for the ring. 1, 2. Hello, Mrs. Callahan's voice was raspy, suspicious. She did not like unknown numbers, but I knew she would answer. Curiosity always won. Mrs. Callahan, I said, my voice smooth, professional, stripped of all daughterly hesitation. This is Leah Martin in Unit 4B. I am currently out of the country, but I have just received a security alert regarding my apartment. I have reason to believe there is an intruder in my home. I paused, letting the word hang there. Intruder, not cousin, not guest. Intruder. I need your help, I said, and I believe we might need the police. The line went quiet for a split second, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of Mrs. Callahan shifting in her chair, the rustle of interest, the sharpening of knives. Tell me everything, she said. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just realized the trap has been sprung. Well, I began, looking out at the beautiful, indifferent ocean. It started about 10 minutes ago, as I waited for Mrs. Callahan to marshal her forces. I sat on that sun-drenched balcony and felt the ghost of 1,000 similar conversations pressing against my chest. The anger vibrating in my hands was not just about a key or an apartment. It was the cumulative interest on a debt I never signed up for, compounding daily for 3 decades. The indoctrination started before I could even tie my own shoes. I was the oldest, the sturdy oak in a forest of weeping willows. My parents did not raise me. They deputized me. I was 6 years old when I learned that my needs were secondary to the atmospheric pressure of the household. If I fell and scraped my knee, I was told to be brave. If Savannah, my younger cousin who lived 2 streets over and spent more time at our house than her own, dropped her ice cream cone, the world stopped to mourn her loss. I remember a specific Thanksgiving when I was 12. I had spent 3 hours helping my mother peel potatoes and set the table, my hands raw from the cold water and the starch. Savannah, who was 10, had spent the afternoon watching cartoons because she complained of a headache. When it was time to eat, there was 1 fewer seat than we had anticipated, due to a miscalculation by my aunt, without even looking up from the turkey he was carving. My father said, "Leah can eat in the kitchen. She is big enough to understand. Savannah needs to be near her mom." I ate on a stool next to the dishwasher, listening to the laughter in the dining room, and I learned the lesson well. Leah can handle it. Leah does not need the seat at the table. Leah is the utility player, not the star. By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic had calcified into law. I was the academic weapon, the designated driver, the one who carried jumper cables and spare cash. Savannah was the eternal victim of circumstance. She was beautiful in a fragile, chaotic way, the kind of girl who drew drama like a lightning rod draws fire. When I was 18, I moved out. I worked 2 jobs, one at a bookstore and one waiting tables at a diner on the graveyard shift, to pay for my community college tuition. I ate peanut butter toast for dinner 4 nights a week. I never asked my parents for a dime, not because I was noble, but because I knew the answer would come with a lecture about responsibility. Meanwhile, Savannah floated. She went to a private liberal arts college paid for by loans her parents co-signed and inevitably defaulted on. She changed majors 5 times. She called me at 2 in the morning, weeping because her professor was mean to her, or her roommates were jealous of her, or the universe was conspiring to ruin her life, and I, trained like a good soldier, would comfort her. The financial bleeding began in our 20s. It started small. $20 for gas because she forgot her wallet. $50 for a bar tab she could not cover. It escalated quickly. I remember the first time I truly bailed her out. I was 24, just starting as a junior analyst, making barely enough to save. Savannah called me in hysterics. She had been kicked out of her apartment because her roommate had stolen the rent money, or so the story went. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She was going to be homeless. She was terrified. I paid her deposit on a new place, $1,200. It was my entire emergency fund. I handed it over with a knot in my stomach, and my mother told me I was a saint. She told me, "God will bless you for looking after family." Savannah promised to pay me back in installments of $100 a month. I saw exactly $0 of that money. 6 months later, when I gently asked about it, Savannah looked at me with wide, wounded eyes. "Leah, you know I just lost my job because that manager was a sociopath. How can you ask me for money when I'm barely eating?" And then came the hammer from my mother. "She is struggling. Leah, you have a steady job. Why are you kicking her when she is down? It is just money. Family is more important than money." That was the trap. If I had money, I was obligated to share it. If I asked for repayment, I was greedy. If I said no, I was cruel. There was the time Savannah totaled her car because she was texting. I paid the $500 deductible so she could get to work. She quit that job 2 weeks later because the vibes were off. There was the time she maxed out a credit card buying a wardrobe for a job interview she never went to. I paid the minimum balance for 3 months so her credit score would not tank. There was the time she adopted a purebred husky puppy she could not afford, and I ended up paying $400 for its vaccinations because she was feeding it cheap kibble and crying that she was a bad mother. I calculated it once, on a sleepless night about 2 years ago, between the loans, the gifts, the bailouts, and the emergency transfers. I had given Savannah nearly $15,000 over a decade. $15,000. That was a down payment. That was a car. That was a freedom fund. But the money was not the worst part. The worst part was the narrative. To my family, I was lucky. My success was not the result of 80-hour work weeks, missed holidays, and ulcers. It was just good fortune. I was good with computers. I liked working. Therefore, my resources were communal. To them, Savannah was unlucky. The world was simply too hard for her sensitive soul. She deserved help. She deserved the breaks I worked for. About 4 years ago, I realized that as long as I appeared successful, I would be their bank. So, I started lying. I did not tell them when I got promoted to senior manager. I did not tell them when my salary crossed the 6-figure mark. I did not tell them about the quarterly bonuses or the stock options. I invented a narrative that fit their worldview. I told them the logistics industry was volatile. I told them my hours were cut. I told them I was transitioning to freelance consulting, which in their minds meant I was unemployed but too proud to admit it. It was a brilliant defense mechanism. When my aunt called asking for a loan for Savannah's newest business scheme selling handmade soap that gave everyone a rash, I could say, "I am so sorry, Aunt Janice, but I have not had a client in 3 weeks. Things are really tight." It worked. The requests for money slowed down. But a new monster emerged. Since they thought I was struggling, or at least drifting, they lost the last shred of respect for my time and my autonomy. If I was just a freelancer sitting at home, why could I not drive Grandma to her appointments if I was not a real executive? Why could I not spend 3 days helping Savannah paint her bedroom? They stopped asking for my money and started demanding my life. That was why they felt comfortable taking my apartment. In their eyes, I was Leah the spinster, Leah the freelancer, Leah who had a nice condo she probably could not afford and definitely did not deserve more than Savannah, who was currently suffering from the tragedy of being evicted for the 3rd time. They looked at my empty apartment and saw a resource being wasted. They looked at my boundaries and saw selfishness. I thought about the last time I saw Savannah, just 2 months ago at a family barbecue. She was wearing a dress that cost $300, drinking wine she did not bring, and complaining about how her landlord was a fascist because he demanded she not burn sage candles directly under the smoke detector. "I just need a break," she had sighed, looking directly at me. "I just need the universe to give me one break. Must be nice to be you. Leah, you have everything figured out. You do not know what it is like to really struggle." I had bitten my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I wanted to scream that I struggled every day to clean up their messes. I wanted to scream that the only reason I had everything figured out was because I knew that if I fell, no one would catch me. If Savannah fell, there was a safety net woven from my bank account and my mother's guilt. If I fell, I would hit the concrete. That reality had hardened me. It had turned my heart into something resembling the obsidian stone I used as a paperweight on my desk, smooth, black, and impenetrable. I sat up on the lounge chair, the memory of that barbecue fueling the cold fire in my gut. My mother's voice echoed in my head. I gave her the key. She had not just given Savannah a key. She had validated Savannah's lifelong belief that she was entitled to the fruits of labor she never performed. She had confirmed that my property was public domain. But they had made a critical error. They believed the lie I had fed them. They thought I was Leah, the struggling freelancer who would be afraid to rock the boat. They thought I was the Leah who paid the $1,200 deposit and said nothing when it vanished. They did not know Leah Martin, the woman who stared down union negotiators and audited shipping manifests for penny frauds. They did not know that the freelance gig was a cover for a career that required a spine of steel. They did not know that I had stopped seeking their approval years ago and had started seeking only peace. And peace, I had learned, was something you had to fight for. I picked up my phone again. The screen was dark, but my reflection stared back at me. I did not look like the 12-year-old girl eating in the kitchen anymore. I looked like a woman who was done being the family sacrifice. They wanted to play the game of, Leah is strong, Leah can handle it. Fine. I would show them exactly how strong I was. I would show them the kind of strength that did not bend, did not break, and certainly did not let freeloaders sleep in my bed while I was paying the mortgage. I was not going to pay this debt. I was going to foreclose on the whole dynamic. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pool deck. In Chicago, it was late afternoon. The locksmith would be arriving soon. I took a deep breath, feeling the oxygen fill my lungs, clearing out the smoke of 30 years of gaslighting. I was not saving Savannah this time. I was not saving my mother from the embarrassment of her own enabling. For the first time in my life, I was saving myself. The physical object that dismantled my life was a piece of brass no larger than my thumb. It had a small, plastic cap on the head, colored a bright, cheerful blue, intended to distinguish it from the mail key or the gym fob. I remembered the exact day I had handed it to my mother. It was 14 months ago, right before I left for a 10-day business trip to Singapore. I had been anxious about a potential leak in the bathroom ceiling, a phantom worry born of my obsession with maintaining the one thing I truly owned. Just in case, I had said, pressing the cold metal into her palm. For emergencies only, if there is a fire, or a flood, or if I die on the plane. My mother had laughed. That dismissive, airy sound she made whenever I expressed a concern she deemed trivial. Oh, Leah, stop being so morbid. Of course it is for emergencies. What do you think I am going to do? Throw a rave. When I returned from Singapore, the ceiling was fine. The emergency never happened. 2 weeks later, when I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, I asked for the key back. I left it in my other purse, my mother had said, waving a hand while she stirred the gravy. I will bring it next time. The next time, she had forgotten it on the dresser. The time after that, she claimed she had put it in a safe place and did not want to dig for it right then. By the fourth time I asked, about 2 months after the trip, the atmosphere shifted. Why are you so obsessed with that key? She had asked, her eyes narrowing with hurt. Do you not trust me? I am your mother, Leah. Do you think I am going to rob you? It is insulting that you are hounding me over a spare key. A daughter should want her mother to have access in case something happens to her. I had backed down. That was the dance steps I knew by heart. I retreated to avoid the accusation of being unloving, of being paranoid, of being a bad daughter. I let her keep the blue-capped key because the cost of retrieving it in emotional war seemed higher than the risk of her having it. I was a fool. That key was not a safety measure. It was a sleeper agent. It was a loaded gun I had placed on the table. And for a year, they had just been waiting for the right moment to pick it up and pull the trigger. Now, Standing on the balcony in Mexico, the memory of that handover burned in my stomach. I had traded my security for their approval, and in the end, I had neither. My phone chimed again. I looked down, expecting another barrage of texts from my mother, but it was an email notification. The subject line read, "Safe and sound." My fingers hovered over the screen. I knew opening it would be an act of masochism, but I needed to see. I needed to know the extent of the occupation. I tapped the icon. The email contained a single photo attached by my mother. It was a picture of my front door, the expensive, heavy oak door I had refinished myself. But the focus of the image was the lock. The deadbolt was shiny, new, and decidedly not the matte black hardware I had installed. The text below the image was brief. Dad changed the cylinder just to be safe since Savannah lost her old keys. Do not worry. We will give you a copy when you get back. She is so happy. Leah. Be happy for her. They had changed the locks. The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. It was not just an invasion. It was a conquest. They had drilled out my authority and replaced it with their own. By changing the locks, they had physically manifested their belief that my ownership was a technicality. While their control was a natural right, I was the name on the deed, but they were the masters of the domain. I exited the email and opened Instagram. I did not follow Savannah. I had muted her years ago to spare myself the daily irritation of her vague booking and drama, but I navigated to her profile. It was public. Of course, Savannah lived for an audience. There was a new story. Posted 17 minutes ago. I tapped the circle around her profile picture. The video opened with a panning shot of my living room. The afternoon light was streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the space I had curated with obsessive care. But the space looked wrong. New beginnings, Savannah's voice chirped from behind the camera, syrupy and triumphant. The universe really provides when you manifest your truth. Look at this view. The camera swung wildly, capturing the skyline, but my eyes were locked on the background details. My vintage leather reading chair, a piece I had saved for 6 months to buy, was pushed awkwardly against the wall to make room for a pile of cardboard boxes. My hand-woven alpaca throw blanket, brought back from a trip to Peru, was wadded up on the floor, serving as a bed for her cat. Her cat. I felt a spike of pure, white-hot adrenaline. My building had a strict no-pets policy, unless they were service animals or grandfathered in. I had signed a rider agreeing to this. Savannah had brought a shedding, scratching animal into a home filled with custom upholstery, in a building that fined residents $200 for unauthorized pets. The video continued. She walked into the kitchen, my kitchen. "And look at this kitchen," she squealed. "I can finally start my vegan meal prep business. It is just so... me." On the counter, my granite counter, sat a greasy pizza box and a puddle of something that looked like soda. A wet ring was staining the stone. I had coasters. I had a specific drawer for coasters not 3 feet from where the box sat. But the final blow was the caption overlaid on the video in loopy. Sparkling text. "My sanctuary, blessed new home family." She was not visiting, she was nesting. She had already mentally colonized the space. In her mind, this was not Leah's apartment. This was the universe's gift to Savannah. I was merely the vessel the universe had used to deliver it. I looked at the items shoved into the corners: my life, my taste, my peace displaced to make room for her chaos. I looked like a stranger in my own home. I looked like a guest who had overstayed their welcome, even though I paid the mortgage. The heat in my body was intense. It started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips, making them tingle. It was a physical reaction to a violation of territory. It was the primal instinct of an animal finding a rival in its den. But strangely, my voice, when I spoke to the empty air, was steady. It was not the shaky, tearful voice of the daughter who wanted to be understood. It was the cold, flat voice of the financial manager who had just discovered embezzlement. "She is using my coasters as a doorstop," I whispered. The glass door to the balcony slid open. Leo stepped out. He was wearing swim trunks and holding 2 fresh bottles of water. His hair was wet. slicked back from his forehead, and he looked relaxed. The picture of a man enjoying a hard-earned break. He saw me standing by the railing, phone in hand, and his smile faltered. He knew the look on my face. He had seen it when I dealt with incompetent vendors or when I reviewed a particularly disastrous audit. He set the water down on the table and walked over to me. "What happened?" he asked. He did not ask if something happened. He knew. I did not speak. I simply turned the phone toward him and played the Instagram story again. Leo watched it in silence. He watched the panning shot of the living room, the cat on the expensive blanket, the pizza box on the granite. He listened to Savannah's voice claiming my sanctuary as her manifestation. He watched it twice. Then he looked at me. His eyes were dark, but calm. Leo was an architect. He understood structure. He understood that a building could not stand if the foundation was rotten. He had been telling me for 3 years that the foundation of my relationship with my family was built on swampland. "They changed the locks," I said, the words tasting like ash. "My mother gave her the emergency key, and then they changed the locks so I cannot get in. They sent me an email." I showed him the picture of the deadbolt. Leo looked at the photo, then back at the video of Savannah spinning in my living room. He took a sip of his water, his movements deliberate. "She has moved in," I said, my voice rising slightly, the panic trying to claw its way out. "Leo, she brought the cat. She pushed my Eames chair into the wall. They told me I should be happy." I looked at him, waiting for him to tell me to calm down. I waited for him to play devil's advocate, to suggest that maybe we could sort it out when we got back, to tell me not to ruin the vacation. That is what people usually did when family was involved. They urged compromise. They urged softness. Leo did none of those things. He set his bottle down and placed both hands on my shoulders. His grip was firm, grounding. "Leah," he said, "do you remember what you told me about the negotiations with the trucking union last fall? You told me that once they break the terms of the contract is void." I nodded, swallowing hard. "This is not a family squabble," he said. "This is a hostile takeover. They waited until you were 3,000 miles away, and they seized your assets. They did it because they think you are too afraid of losing their love to fight back." He looked at the phone, where the video had looped back to the start. "You don't need to negotiate with disrespect," he said. The sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. You don't need to negotiate with disrespect. It was so simple. For years, I had treated their disrespect as a starting position, an opening offer that I had to counter with kindness and logic. I thought if I explained myself well enough, if I was generous enough, they would eventually agree to respect me. But you cannot negotiate with someone who is stealing from you. You do not debate with a burglar about which television they are allowed to take. You call the police. The heat in my chest coalesced into a cold, hard knot. The trembling in my hands stopped. I looked at the blue ocean one last time. I looked at the paradise I was paying for, the peace I had earned. They wanted to take this from me too. They wanted me to spend my vacation worrying, calling, begging, negotiating. I was done begging. "You are right," I said. I turned away from the railing. I picked up my phone. I closed Instagram. I closed my email. I did not call my mother. I did not text my father. I went to my contacts and found the number I had prepared in my mind earlier. "What are you going to do?" Leo asked, though I think he already knew. "I am going to authorize a security breach protocol," I said. I pressed the call button for Mrs. Callahan. This was not a daughter calling for help. This was a landlord protecting her investment. This was the first time in 34 years that I acted without running the decision through the filter of, how will this make Mom feel? I did not care how it made her feel. She had given away my key. She had forfeited her right to my feelings. The phone rang. "Hello?" Mrs. Callahan's voice answered, suspicious and sharp. "Mrs. Callahan," I said, and this time, there was no hesitation, no waver in my tone. "I have visual confirmation of unauthorized occupants in my unit. They have altered the physical structure of the entry. I need you to call the police, and I'm sending you a digital copy of my deed and my identification right now." I looked at Leo. He nodded. "Burn it down," he mouthed. Let's get them out. I said into the phone. Tonight, Mrs. Callahan did not just answer the phone. She commandeered the line. Her voice was a rasp of unfiltered tobacco smoke and authority, a relic from her 30 years in dispatch, where seconds cost lives and indecision was a fireable offense. When I explained that my locks had been changed without my consent, the silence on the other end was not one of confusion. It was the heavy pressurized silence of a weapon being loaded. They drilled the cylinder, she asked, her voice dropping to a low growl. You did not authorize a locksmith. No, I said, gripping the phone tighter. I am in Mexico. I have the only set of authorized keys with me, aside from the emergency set I gave my mother. They changed the hardware today. I have photographic evidence. That is a violation of Bylaw Section 7, Paragraph 4, Mrs. Callahan recited instantly. No resident may alter entry mechanisms without board approval and providing a copy to the management office for fire safety access. If there is a gas leak right now, Leah, I cannot get in. The fire department would have to take an axe to your door. I want them out, Mrs. Callahan, I said. I am formally requesting that you treat this as an unauthorized entry. They do not have a lease. They do not have my permission. They are trespassers. If they have a key, the police might call it a civil matter, she warned. The ex-cop in her surfacing. They will say it is a family dispute. Police hate domestic calls. They want to write a report and leave. They do not have a key to the unit, I corrected her, feeling a cold satisfaction in the technicality. They have a key to a lock that does not exist anymore. They destroyed my property, the original lock, and installed their own. That is vandalism. And since I am the deed holder, and I am telling you, the building president, that they are intruders, you have the authority to remove them. I do, she agreed, but I need it in writing. I cannot kick out your own blood on a phone call. I need a signed statement authorizing me to act as your proxy, and I need a formal declaration that the current occupants are trespassing. Can you get to a computer? I can do it from my phone, I said. I will sign a digital affidavit right now. I will email you the deed, my ID, and the time-stamped photo my mother sent me of the new lock. Do it, she said. I am calling the precinct. I know the sergeant on duty. I will meet them in the lobby. Get me that paper. Leah, and turn your ringer off. Once the squad car pulls up, your family is going to lose their minds. She hung up without saying goodbye. Mrs. Callahan was already moving. I spent the next 20 minutes in a hyper-focused fugue state. Leo sat next to me, using his phone to look up the specific trespassing statutes for our county. Just in case we needed to quote them, I drafted the email with the precision of a surgeon. I stated clearly that I was the sole owner of the property. I stated that no lease existed. I stated that the individuals inside had gained access under false pretenses and had altered the physical structure of the dwelling without consent. I attached the photos. I signed the document with my digital ID. I hit send. It is done, I said, placing the phone on the table. Now we wait, Leo said. He signaled the waiter for another round of water. Drink. Your adrenaline is spiking. You are going to crash if you do not hydrate. I drank the water, but I did not feel the crash. I felt a strange, vibrating hum in my nerves, like a high-tension wire in the wind. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange, a beautiful backdrop for the demolition of my family dynamic. 10 minutes later, the first mortar shell landed. My phone lit up. It was Savannah. The doorman just called up. He says the building president is coming up with the police, Leah. What is going on? Tell them it is a mistake. I stared at the message. The panic was palpable even through the text. She had likely been in the middle of unpacking, perhaps hanging a poster over my expensive wallpaper. When the call came, I did not reply. 2 minutes later, another text from Savannah. Leah, seriously, stop playing around. This isn't funny. Mrs. Callahan is banging on the door. She is shouting about the fire code. Call her off. I am shaking. Then, the tone shifted. The pleading vanished, replaced by the entitlement that was her factory setting. You are being such a bitch right now. I am family. You are really going to humiliate me like this, after everything I have been through. Open the door, I watched the texts roll in like waves. I could visualize the scene perfectly. Savannah standing on the other side of my oak door, looking through the peephole, seeing Mrs. Callahan's formidable frame and the blue uniforms behind her. She was realizing that her charm, which worked on my parents and her hapless boyfriends, had no currency here. Then came the call from my mother. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. Immediately. She called again, and again. The screen flashed Mom incessantly, a strobe light of guilt. When she finally stopped calling, the text appeared. It was long, a block of gray text that took up the whole screen. Leah Marie Martin. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Savannah says the police are at the door. The police. For your cousin. Have you lost your mind? She is a guest. We told you she was staying there. How dare you treat your family like criminals? Call the police station immediately and tell them this is a misunderstanding. She just got kicked out of her apartment yesterday. She is fragile. If you do this, you are heartless. You are choosing a condo over your own flesh and blood. Fix this now. I read the words, and for the first time in my life, they did not land. They bounced off the armor I had forged in the last hour. Heartless. That was their favorite word for me whenever I failed to be a doormat. If protecting my home from invasion was heartless, then I would gladly be the Tin Man. She says I am heartless, I told Leo, showing him the screen. She is projecting, Leo said calmly. She is the one who put her niece in a position to be evicted by the police because she felt entitled to give away something that was not hers. She is the one who failed Savannah, not you. Then, a new number popped up. It was my Aunt Janice, Savannah's mother. Janice was the family dramatist, a woman who could turn a paper cut into a near-death experience. How could you, the text, read? Savannah is terrified. She is crying. And with the baby there, you are traumatizing a child. Leah, I hope you are proud of yourself. I frowned, reading the message twice. The baby, Leo, I said, confused. Janice says there is a baby there. Leo leaned in, reading the text over my shoulder. Does Savannah have a child? No, I said firmly. Absolutely not, unless she gave birth in secret in the last 3 months, which is impossible because she posts body check selfies every day. She does not have a kid. Then why is your aunt saying that? I thought about it, and then the realization hit me with the force of a physical slap. They are lying to the police, I whispered. They are telling the police there is a baby inside so they won't break the door down. Or they are trying to create a record that I evicted a mother and child to make me look like a monster to the rest of the family. Or, Leo said, his eyes narrowing, they are counting on you panicking. They think if you hear baby, you will call off the dogs because you will be afraid of the liability. It was a tactic. It was a bluff. Aunt Janice was trying to rewrite reality in real time, fabricating a vulnerable infant to use as a human shield against the consequences of their actions. It was grotesque. It was desperate. And it was the final nail in the coffin. If they were willing to invent a child to manipulate me, there was no line they would not cross. That is it, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. They are not just entitled, they are delusional. I started to type a reply. My thumbs flew across the keyboard. There is no baby. Stop lying. You are making it worse. Leo's hand covered mine. He did not grab the phone. He just placed his warm, heavy hand over my fingers, stopping the motion. Don't, he said softly. But they are lying, I argued, looking up at him. I have to tell them I know they are lying. To who? Leo asked. Janice knows she is lying. You know she is lying. Telling her you know changes nothing. It just gives her an opening to argue, to gaslight you, to say, oh, I meant her fur baby, or some other nonsense. Do not engage. Do not give them the satisfaction of a response. He was right. Engaging was fuel. Silence was a vacuum. The police will figure it out when they open the door and see there is no crib. Leo continued. Let them dig their own grave. Mrs. Callahan is there. She's not going to fall for a phantom baby. I lowered the phone. I did not send the text. The phone continued to vibrate. My father called. Then my brother, who usually stayed out of everything, sent a text. Mom is freaking out. Just let her stay. Leah. It is not worth the drama. Not worth the drama. That was the family motto. Peace at any price, provided I was the one paying the price. I set the phone on the table, face up. I watched the notifications stack up. It was a digital assault, a coordinated bombing campaign designed to break my will through sheer volume of noise. Call off the police. You are selfish. It is just an apartment. She has nowhere to go. We will never forgive this. I watched the words appear and vanish as the screen timed out, only to light up again with a new attack. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. For years, my role had been the firefighter. When a spark flew, I rushed to stomp it out. When a crisis emerged, I threw my money and my time at it until the flames died down. I was the one who managed the emotions, who smoothed the feathers, who absorbed the heat so everyone else could stay cool. Now, the house was on fire. The flames were licking at the ceiling. They were screaming for the firefighter, but I was not holding a hose. I was sitting in a lounge chair in Mexico, watching it burn, and I did not feel guilty. I felt clear. The guilt I had carried for decades, the guilt of being more successful, of being independent, of saying no was based on the premise that I owed them something. I thought I owed them my stability because they were chaotic. I thought I owed them my strength because they were weak. But they were not weak. You have to be incredibly strong to be this manipulative. You have to be relentless to bulldoze someone's boundaries with this much efficiency. They were not helpless. They were predatory. And I was not their prey anymore. Look at them, I said to Leo, gesturing to the phone as it buzzed again. They are not worried about me. They are not asking why I'm doing this. They are only worried about losing control. Correction, Leo said, taking a sip of his drink. They are worried about consequences. They have never met them before. The phone rang again. Mom. I reached out and flipped the phone over, face down on the cool teak table. The buzzing continued, muffled against the wood, a distant, angry insect that could no longer sting me. I wonder if Mrs. Callahan has the locksmith there yet, I mused, looking back at the ocean. The sun had touched the water now, bleeding red into the deep blue. Knowing her, Leo said. She probably brought her own drill. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, but it was real. Good, I said. I hope she charges me for the rush service. I will frame the invoice. I picked up the menu from the side table. My stomach, which had been twisted in knots for an hour, suddenly felt empty. I am hungry, I said. I think I want the steak. Leo looked at me, scanning my face for cracks in the facade. He found none. He smiled back. Steak sounds good, he said. We sat there as the twilight deepened, the sound of the ocean mixing with the faint, rhythmic buzzing of the phone on the table. In a condo complex 2,000 miles away, my family was screaming, lying, and pounding on walls. They were creating a hurricane of drama, but here, in the eye of the storm I had created, it was perfectly, beautifully quiet. The sun had completely vanished below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. When Mrs. Callahan called me back, I had been staring at the phone for 45 minutes, my steak growing cold and untouched beside me. Leo was reading a book on his tablet, or pretending to, while keeping a vigilant watch on my expression. When the screen lit up, I did not hesitate. I answered on the first ring and put it on speaker so Leo could hear. Mrs. Callahan, I asked. It is done, she said. Her voice was breathless, not from exertion, but from the adrenaline of a confrontation one. But you are going to want to hear the details. Leah. I kept the line open on mute for the first 10 minutes so I could record the interaction for the board minutes. I think you need to know exactly what went down. Tell me, I said, leaning in. I met Officer Miller and his partner in the lobby, she began, launching into the narrative with the precision of a court reporter. I showed them your deed, your digital affidavit, and the bylaws regarding unauthorized key duplication. Officer Miller was not amused. He deals with break-ins all day. He does not like it when people treat property law like a suggestion. Mrs. Callahan described the ascent to the fourth floor. She had brought the building's preferred locksmith, a burly man named Dave, who had been changing cylinders in our complex for 20 years. They marched down the hallway, a phalanx of legal authority. When they arrived at my door, Unit 4B, Mrs. Callahan did not knock politely. She pounded. Police, open up. According to Mrs. Callahan, there was a frantic scrambling sound from inside, the sound of someone tripping over boxes. Then, silence. We know you are in there, Officer Miller had shouted. Open the door or we will drill it. The door opened a crack. The chain was still on. Savannah's face appeared in the gap, pale and wide-eyed. She looked at Mrs. Callahan, then at the two uniformed officers, and then at the locksmith holding a heavy drill. What is going on? Savannah had squeaked. I live here. Open the door, ma'am, Officer Miller said. We have a report of unauthorized entry and criminal trespassing. Savannah undid the chain and opened the door. She was wearing one of my silk robes. I flinched when Mrs. Callahan told me that robe cost $200 and was a gift from Leo. There must be a mistake, Savannah said, trying to summon the charm that had worked on every landlord and ex-boyfriend she had ever manipulated. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. This is my cousin's place, Leah Martin. She knows I am here. She gave me the keys. Well, she gave my aunt the keys to give to me. It is a family arrangement. Do you have a lease? The officer asked, pulling out his notepad. A lease, Savannah laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. No, of course not. We are family. We do not do paperwork. Leah said I could stay here while I looked for a new place. She is in Mexico right now. You can't ask her. But she totally agreed to it verbally before she left. Verbal consent does not override the deed holder's written affidavit, Mrs. Callahan interjected from the hallway. I have a sworn statement from the owner, time-stamped 20 minutes ago, stating she did not authorize anyone to be in this unit. She also states she did not authorize the locks to be changed. The officer looked at the brand-new, shiny deadbolt. Did you change this lock, ma'am? Well, yeah, Savannah stammered. I lost the other key, so my uncle came over and fixed it. It was a safety thing. I was protecting the property. You damaged the property, Mrs. Callahan corrected her. That is vandalism. Look, Savannah said, her voice rising in pitch, shifting from charm to indignation. You guys are making a huge deal out of nothing. Leah is just being dramatic. She is probably drunk on margaritas right now and forgot she told me I could stay. If you just leave, I will call her and sort it out. We have her on file right here, the officer said. She sent us the complaint. She is not confused, ma'am. She wants you out. This was the moment reality began to puncture Savannah's bubble. She realized that the Leah is crazy defense was not working on men who carried badges and handcuffs. But I have a baby. Savannah suddenly blurted out. Mrs. Callahan paused in her retelling, letting the silence hang for a moment. I walked right past her. Mrs. Callahan said to me, I walked right into your living room. The officer followed me. We looked everywhere. Bedroom, bathroom, closet. There was no baby. Leah, there was no crib. There were no diapers. There was just a cat scratching up your leather chair and a half-eaten pizza on the counter. So she lied to the police, I said, feeling a cold vindication. Officer Miller was not happy. Mrs. Callahan continued. He looked at her and said, Ma'am, filing a false report is a crime. Lying to an officer is a bad idea. Where is the child? She is with her grandmother right now. Savannah backpedaled, her face turning red. But she was going to come here tomorrow. I am a single mother. You cannot evict a single mother. You are not being evicted, the officer said flatly. You are being removed for trespassing. You do not live here. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises, or you will be arrested for breaking and entering. That was when Savannah played her final card, the ace of spades in the family deck. "I am calling my aunt," she screamed. "You people are crazy, my aunt will tell you." She pulled out her phone and FaceTime called my mother. She held the screen up to the officer's face like it was a talisman that could ward off evil spirits. "Mrs. Callahan described the scene with grim satisfaction. My mother's face filled the screen, pixelated and frantic. She was sitting in her kitchen, likely surrounded by my father and aunt. "Officer," my mother shrieked from the phone speaker. "Officer, listen to me. That is my niece. She has my permission to be there. I am the mother of the owner. I gave her the key. You cannot throw her out into the street at night. We are family." Blood is thicker than water. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said to the phone, his voice bored and unimpressed, "is your name on the deed?" "Well, no, but I am her mother." "Then you have no legal standing here," he said. "Your daughter is an adult. She owns the property. She has revoked access. Unless you have a power of attorney document signed by Leah Martin, your permission is irrelevant." "Irrelevant," my mother gasped. "I am her mother." "How dare you? Leah is being a brat. Put her on the phone. I will straighten her out." "This isn't a parenting dispute, ma'am," the officer said. "This is a property crime scene. Goodbye." And then, the officer reached out and firmly lowered Savannah's hand, pointing the phone at the floor. 10 minutes, he repeated to Savannah. "Start packing." "Oh my God," I whispered, pressing my hand over my mouth. The image of my mother's authority shattering against the wall of the law was stunning. For 30 years, her word had been law. "Because I said so," was the ultimate argument. But in the real world, "because I said so" meant nothing without a signature on a contract. It was messy, Mrs. Callahan said. She did not pack neatly. She threw things into garbage bags. She was crying the whole time, screaming that you were dead to her, that you were a monster. She tried to take your toaster. By the way, I stopped her. I told her if it wasn't in a box when she walked in, it stays. "Thank you," I said, though I did not care about the toaster. "The police escorted her out," Mrs. Callahan said. "They made her leave the key on the counter. She had 2 bags of clothes and that cat carrier. She was standing in the hallway, calling you every name in the book. Her Uber arrived 5 minutes ago. She is gone." "And the apartment?" I asked. "Dave is there right now," she said. "He drilled out the lock your father put in. He is installing a high-security Medico deadbolt, the kind you cannot duplicate at a hardware store. He is also securing the balcony door, just in case." My phone vibrated. A text came through from Mrs. Callahan's number. It was a photo. It showed my front door. The wood around the handle was slightly scuffed, a scar from the violence of the drill, but the new lock was there. It was silver, heavy, and gleaming. "I have the only 2 keys," Mrs. Callahan said. "I will keep them in the building safe until you return. No one gets in. Not your mother, not your father, not the Pope himself unless he is on the lease." "Mrs. Callahan," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I do not know how to thank you." "You pay your HOA fees on time," she said gruffly. "And you follow the rules. Savannah parked in my spot 2 years ago. I have a long memory. Enjoy your vacation. Leah, it is over." The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of the Mexican evening. The resort was quiet now. The dinner rush moving toward the restaurants. The pool lights had turned on, illuminating the water in a brilliant, artificial blue. I looked at the photo of the lock again. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. The intruder was gone. My property was secure. The police had sided with me. My mother had been silenced. But instead of triumph, a cold shiver worked its way down my spine. It was the terrifying realization of how fragile it all was. I had spent my life building this fortress. I had worked thousands of hours, sacrificed relationships, saved every penny, and carefully constructed a life that was mine alone. I thought I was safe because I was independent, but all it took was one small key, and a family that did not respect me to dismantle it in an afternoon. If I had been in a meeting and missed the call, if Mrs. Callahan had been on vacation, if I had not had the money for a lawyer or the knowledge of how to write an affidavit, they would have won. Savannah would be sleeping in my bed tonight. My mother would be feeling righteous and benevolent, having used my resources to solve her problem. My home was not a fortress. It was just a box with a lock, and the people I was supposed to trust most in the world were the ones trying to break it. Leah. Leo's voice was soft. He touched my arm. I flinched, then relaxed. "They are gone," I said. Callahan watched them leave. They tried to take the toaster. Leo let out a short, incredulous laugh. "The toaster?" "Yeah." I looked at him. My mother tried to order the police officer to stop. She told him she was my mother, so she had authority. And he told her she was irrelevant. I tasted the word, irrelevant. It was a harsh word. It was a cruel word. But in that moment, it was the most beautiful word in the English language. My mother's feelings were irrelevant to the law. Her guilt trips were irrelevant to the deed. Her demands were irrelevant to my rights. I had spent my entire life making myself small so their feelings would be relevant. I had made myself irrelevant in my own story so they could be the main characters. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. "I need a drink," I said. "A real one, not water." "We can go to the bar," Leo said, standing up with me. "Or we can order room service." "Bar," I said. "I want to be around people. I want to see strangers who do not know my name and do not want anything from me." As we walked back toward the hotel room to change, my phone buzzed again. It was an email from my father. The subject line was blank. I did not open it. I swiped left and hit delete. Then I went into my settings. I found the block contact feature. I had blocked toxic ex-boyfriends before. I had blocked spam callers. I had blocked aggressive recruiters. I scrolled to mom. My finger hovered for a second. Just a second. I remembered the blue-capped key. I remembered her voice saying I gave her the key as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I pressed the button. Block contact. I did the same for my father, and Savannah, and Aunt Janice. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. It was heavy with the weight of a bridge collapsing, the sound of structural failure as the old way of living fell into the abyss. I walked into the hotel room, the air conditioning hitting my face like a cold kiss. My apartment in Chicago was empty. My phone was silent. For the first time in 34 years, I was completely, terrifiedly, wonderfully alone. The silence I had purchased with the block button lasted exactly 3 hours. I had foolishly believed that blocking the primary aggressors, my mother, my father, and Savannah would sever the connection. I thought I could simply opt out of the drama by removing their digital access to me, but I had underestimated the sheer hydraulic pressure of a family system in collapse. When you block the main valve, the pressure does not disappear. It simply finds other pipes to burst. It started with the peripheral relatives. These were the aunts, second cousins, and great-uncles I spoke to perhaps once a year at Christmas or weddings. They were people who did not know my job title, my favorite color, or my middle name, yet suddenly, they were all experts on my moral character. My phone, which I had left face up on the nightstand, began to light up with notifications from apps I rarely used. Facebook Messenger, Instagram, direct messages, even LinkedIn. The family grapevine had been activated, and the narrative being fed into it was a work of fiction so compelling that even I almost believed I was the villain. The first wave was composed of what I call the peacekeepers. These were the messages that tried to guilt me back into compliance under the guise of concern. My cousin Emily, who I had not seen since her wedding 4 years ago, sent a long paragraph. "Leah, I heard what happened. I know you are stressed from work, but please think about what you are doing. Savannah is just a girl. She is crying in a Motel 6 right now. She has nowhere to go. Please, just call your mom. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person." That phrase was the anthem of my childhood. It was the code word for Let them hurt you because it is inconvenient for us to stop them. Being the bigger person always meant absorbing the blow so no one else had to hear the impact. Then came my Aunt Rita. Leah, family is all we have. You have so much. And Savannah has so little. Do not let money destroy your soul. Call off the police. Let her back in. We can fix this. I read these messages with a dry, hollow feeling in my chest. They were begging me. They were painting a picture of Savannah as a Dickensian orphan cast out into the snow, conveniently omitting the part where she had broken into my home, vandalized my property, and lied to the police about a non-existent baby. But as the hours ticked by and I did not respond because there is no response to insanity that does not sound insane itself, the tone shifted. The begging stopped. The threats began. The narrative curdled. I was no longer the stressed cousin who needed to be guided back to the light. I was the enemy. A message from my Uncle Bob, a man who had once borrowed $2,000 from my father and never paid it back. You are a cold-hearted bitch. Your mother is in the hospital with high blood pressure because of you. If anything happens to her, it is on your hands. My mother was not in the hospital. I knew this because if she were, my brother would have called me, and he was the only one currently maintaining radio silence. But the lie was designed to be a hook, a piece of bait to drag me back into the emotional arena. Then, the hotel phone rang. It was nearly midnight. Leo was asleep beside me, his breathing deep and rhythmic. The harsh mechanical ring of the landline cut through the dark room like a siren. I stared at it. Only the front desk had this number, or someone who had called the front desk and claimed a life-or-death emergency to get patched through. I picked up the receiver. I did not say hello. You have humiliated us. It was my father. His voice was not the reasonable, logical tone he used when he was trying to manipulate me. It was ice. It was the voice of a man who had lost control of his household and was looking for someone to punish. I did not humiliate you, I whispered, careful not to wake Leo. You humiliated yourselves when you tried to steal my house. Do not play word games with me. Leah, he snapped. Your mother is a wreck. Savannah is hysterical. The whole family is talking about us. They are asking why our daughter would call the police on her own flesh and blood. Do you know what that looks like? Do you know how that reflects on me? I do not care how it reflects on you. Dad, I said, it is not my job to manage your reputation. It is my job to protect my life. Your life, he scoffed. Your life is what we gave you. We raised you. We supported you. And this is how you repay us, by throwing your cousin on the street over a condo. It is just brick and mortar. Leah, people are what matter. If people matter, I asked, my hand trembling slightly, then why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you respect me enough to ask before you gave away my home? Because we knew you would be selfish about it, he shouted. We knew you would say no. So we did what had to be done for the family. We made an executive decision. There it was, the naked truth. They had bypassed my consent because they knew I would have boundaries, and my boundaries were obstacles to their desires. I am done, Dad, I said. I blocked your cell. I am going to hang up this phone. If you hang up, he said, his voice dropping low, vibrating with menace, do not call us back, ever. If you choose that apartment over your family, you can stay in it alone. Don't come to Christmas. Don't come to Thanksgiving. Don't come when I die. If you are this ruthless, you are not my daughter. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. It was the ultimate weapon, the nuclear option. He was threatening me with orphanhood. He was betting that the little girl inside me, the one who just wanted to be praised for setting the table, would crack. He was betting that the fear of being alone was greater than my self-respect. For a second, the old panic flared. The instinct to apologize, to fix it, to say I'm sorry. I will send money for a hotel. Just don't hate me, rose up in my throat. But then I looked at Leo sleeping next to me. I looked at the dark outline of the palm trees outside the window. I thought about the locksmith drilling into my door because my father felt entitled to violate my sanctuary. I realized that his love was a hostage situation. It was only available as long as I paid the ransom, and the ransom was my autonomy. Okay, I said. The silence on the other end was stunned. He had expected tears. He had expected bargaining. Okay, he repeated. Okay, I said again, my voice steady. If the price of being your daughter is letting you abuse me, then I cannot afford it. Goodbye, Dad. I placed the receiver back on the cradle. I did not slam it. I just set it down. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I felt like I had just cut off a limb. There was shock, numbness, and the phantom sensation of a connection that was no longer there. I stood up and walked to the balcony door. I slid it open and stepped out into the humid, salt-heavy air. I sat on one of the chairs and pulled my knees to my chest. The ocean was black and invisible, only the sound of the crashing waves proving it was there. I did not cry. That was the strange part. I expected to be sobbing, but the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a profound, exhausting familiarity. This pain, the pain of being misunderstood, of being cast as the villain, of being told I was selfish for having needs, was not new. I had felt this pain when I was 10 and didn't want to share my birthday money. I had felt it when I was 16 and didn't want to drive Savannah to the mall. I had felt it when I was 25 and refused to co-sign a loan. The only difference was the volume. "You are awake," Leo's voice came from the doorway. He stepped out, wrapping the hotel blanket around his shoulders. He sat down next to me. "My dad called the hotel," I said. "He told me not to come home. He said I am not his daughter anymore." Leo looked at me, his face illuminated by the faint light from the room. He did not look surprised. "He is trying to fire you," Leo said. "Fire me?" "Yeah," Leo said. "You think you are their child, Leah, but you are not. You are their employee. You are the crisis manager, the banker, and the emotional dumping ground. You just went on strike. And now, because you refuse to work for free, the boss is firing you." I laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. "That is a terrible metaphor." "It is an accurate one," he countered. "Think about it. Did he ask how you were? Did he ask why you were hurt? No. He issued a performance review. He told you that you were failing to meet the expectations of the role, and he threatened to terminate the contract." He reached out and took my hand. "They are not mad because Savannah is homeless," Leo said softly. "Savannah has been homeless 5 times. They know how to handle that. They are mad because you took away their remote control. They pushed a button, the Leah fixes it button, and nothing happened. That terrifies them. If they can't control you, they have to deal with their own mess, and they hate that." I looked out at the dark water. Leo was right. My father's threat wasn't about love, it was about power. He was trying to reassert dominance by threatening the one thing he thought I needed his approval. But the funny thing was, now that he had taken it away, I didn't feel empty. I felt unburdened. I realized I had spent 34 years climbing a mountain, carrying them on my back, trying to reach a summit where they would finally say, "Good job, Leah. We love you just for being you." But that summit did not exist. The mountain was a treadmill. No matter how hard I climbed, they would just increase the incline. I was not cutting them off. I was just stepping off the machine. "I am the villain," I whispered. "To all of them. My aunts, my cousins, they all think I am a monster." "Let them," Leo said fiercely. "Be the villain in their story, Leah. Because in your story, you are the hero who finally saved herself. You cannot be the protagonist of your own life while you are busy being a supporting character in theirs." I nodded slowly. The heavy, suffocating blanket of guilt began to lift, replaced by the cool breeze of the ocean. I stood up. I walked back into the room and went to the desk where the phone sat. I unplugged the cord from the wall. Then I picked up my cell phone. I went to the settings. I turned on Do Not Disturb. I selected the option that allowed no calls, no messages, no notifications from anyone except Leo. I looked at the screen one last time. There were 12 new messages from unknown numbers, probably cousins I had forgotten existed. I didn't read them. "They cannot control what they cannot touch," I said. I put the phone in the drawer of the nightstand and slid it shut. The sound of the drawer closing was final. It was the sound of a vault door locking. I climbed back into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what would happen tomorrow. I wasn't worried about fixing Savannah's life. I wasn't worried about my mother's blood pressure, which I knew was perfectly fine. I closed my eyes. "Good night, Leo," I said. "Good night, Leah," he replied, and for the first time in a decade, I slept without dreaming of falling. The fluorescent lights in Mrs. Callahan's office hummed with a frequency that made my teeth ache. It was Tuesday morning, less than 12 hours after my flight touched down at O'Hare, and I had not gone to my apartment yet. I went straight to the management office, dragging my rolling suitcase behind me like an anchor. Mrs. Callahan sat behind her desk, looking exactly as she had sounded on the phone: formidable, efficient, and entirely unimpressed by human folly. She did not offer me coffee. She offered me a stack of paper. "The police report number is at the top," she said, tapping the document with a manicured fingernail. "Officer Miller wrote it up as a domestic disturbance with a side of criminal trespass, though he did not press charges because she vacated voluntarily. But this," she slid a second paper across the laminate desk, "is the invoice for the locksmith, the overtime for the doorman who had to supervise the removal of her property, and the administrative fee for my time." I looked at the number. It was $650. "Worth every penny," I said, reaching for my checkbook. "And this," she produced a third document, "is a formal notice of no trespass. I have already filed a copy with the precinct. If Savannah, or your mother, or anyone not on the lease attempts to gain access to the building again, they will be arrested on sight. No warnings, no phone calls, handcuffs." I took the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. In the past, the old Leah would have hesitated. The old Leah would have thought, "Is this too harsh? What if there is an emergency? What if they want to apologize?" The new Leah signed her name with a flourish that nearly tore the paper. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan," I said, "for protecting my home when I couldn't. I protect the building." "Leah," she said, her eyes softening just a fraction, "you just happen to live in it. Here are your new keys. Medeco high security. Do not lose them. I do not have a master for this specific cylinder yet." I took the heavy silver keys. They felt cold and substantial in my palm. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and silence. When I reached Unit 4B, I paused. The door looked the same, except for the shiny new lock that signaled a fortress mentality. I inserted the key. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. I expected a disaster zone. I expected trash, or stains, or the smell of cat litter, but what I found was something more insidious. The apartment was clean. Savannah, to her credit, or perhaps out of fear of the police, had taken her boxes and her cat, but the space felt violated in a way that bleach could not fix. It was the subtle wrongness of it all. My throw pillows were arranged in a color order I never used. The blinds were pulled up to a height I never set. The air smelled faintly of a perfume I did not own, something floral and cloying that hung in the drapes. I walked into the living room. My Eames chair was back in its place, but the leather bore a small, faint scratch near the armrest, a cat scratch. I moved to the mantel above the electric fireplace. This was where I kept my framed photos. Me and Leo in Paris, my graduation photo, a picture of me and my grandmother before she passed. They were all there, but they were face down. I froze. I reached out and picked up the photo of me and Leo. The glass was not broken. The frame was not damaged. Savannah had simply turned them over. She had laid them flat against the wood so she would not have to look at my face. She wanted my home, my view, and my comfort, but she did not want the reminder of the person who paid for it. She wanted to erase me while inhabiting my life. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a ghost sensation, the ghost of Savannah's entitlement walking through my rooms, touching my things, deciding which parts of my existence were palatable enough to display and which needed to be hidden. She turned the pictures down. I whispered. Leo came up behind me. He had brought the luggage in. He saw the frame in my hand. Leah, he said gently, we can hire a deep cleaner. We can smudge the place with sage. We can repaint. I looked around. I looked at the kitchen island where the pizza box had been. I looked at the sofa where she had likely slept. I don't think paint fixes this, I said. That night, I tried to reclaim my space. I ordered sushi, my favorite. I lit my expensive candles. I put on jazz. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I could not sleep. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like my mother coming to demand an apology. I kept looking at the bedroom door, waiting for it to open. I realized then that a lock is only a physical barrier. It cannot keep out the knowledge that the people who raised you feel entitled to break it. They knew where I lived. They knew the code to the outer gate. They knew which window was mine. I was safe legally, but I did not feel safe spiritually. My sanctuary had been breached, and the psychological walls had crumbled. Leo rolled over at 3 a.m. He saw me sitting up, staring at the bedroom door. "We have to move," he said. It was not a question. "No," I whispered, fierce and stubborn. "If I move, they win. They chased me out of my own home. I am not running away. I have the law on my side. This is not about winning." "Leah," Leo said, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "This is about peace. You are sitting guard in your own bedroom. That is not a victory. That is an occupation." I stayed silent. He was right. I was occupying my own life, defending territory rather than living in it. "I love this apartment," I said, my voice cracking. "I worked so hard for it." "You did," Leo said, "and you can work hard for the next one. But this one has their fingerprints all over it. Every time you walk through that door, you are going to remember the police and the locksmith and the pictures face down." He reached out and touched my hand. "A home is supposed to be the one place where you do not have to look over your shoulder." The next morning, I called a realtor, not just any realtor, but a specialist in high-end, secure properties. "I need a fortress," I told her over the phone. "I want a gated community with a 24-hour guard booth. I want a place where you have to show ID to get within 100 yards of my front door, and I want it to be unlisted." We spent 3 days looking. I saw penthouses with doormen, but they felt too exposed. I saw houses in the suburbs, but they felt too accessible. Then we found the townhouse in Emerald Hills. It was in a small, exclusive enclave on the north side of the city. There was a wrought iron gate manned by a serious-looking guard who checked license plates against a clipboard. The community was quiet, lined with old trees and high brick walls. The townhouse itself was perfect. It was end unit, private, with a heavy mahogany door and a garage that opened directly into the kitchen, no walking through common hallways, no shared lobbies. "It is 3 bedrooms," the realtor, a sharp woman named Elena, said as we walked through the sun-drenched living room, 4 bathrooms, a private courtyard, and the security fees are steep, but the privacy is absolute. I looked at the price tag. $750,000. It was a significant jump from my condo. Elena looked at me, gauging my reaction. She saw a woman in her 30s, dressed in business casual, who had arrived in a sensible sedan. She likely assumed I would need a mortgage contingency, or perhaps a cosigner. "I know it is at the top of the market," Elena said gently. "If you need to discuss financing with your partner—" "I am buying it myself," I said. Elena blinked. "Oh, okay. Well, usually for a purchase of this size, the board requires proof of funds, and if you are expecting help from family for the down payment, we would need a gift letter." I almost laughed. A gift letter. My family would sooner write a ransom note than a gift letter. "No family help," I said, "and no mortgage." I opened my banking app on my phone, the one my family did not know existed. The one where I had been funneling my bonuses, my stock dividends, and the aggressive savings from my freelance years. I showed her the balance. Elena's eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. She looked from the phone to me. her expression shifting from polite salesperson to respectful ally. "I see," she said. "That simplifies things considerably. My family thought I was scraping by. They thought I was one missed paycheck away from needing them. They had no idea that while they were buying new cars and bailing Savannah out of debt, I was compounding interest. I want to close in 10 days, I said. I will pay cash, but I have one condition." "Name it," Elena said. "The deed needs to be in an LLC, I said. "I do not want my name on public records. If someone searches for Leah Martin in the property database, I want them to find nothing." Elena nodded slowly. She did not ask why. She worked in high-end real estate. She knew that for some women, anonymity was a luxury more expensive than marble countertops. "We can do that," she said. "I can have the lawyers set up a blind trust." She paused, looking at me with curiosity. "Usually, people ask their parents for advice on a purchase this big. Is there anyone you want to bring back for a second showing your mother? Perhaps?" The question hung in the empty room. I thought about my mother. I thought about how she would critique the kitchen, how she would complain about the stairs, how she would immediately calculate which room would be best for Savannah when she inevitably needed a place to stay. I thought about the blue-capped key. "No," I said, and the word felt lighter than air. "My family does not get a vote this time." "Understood," Elena said, smiling. "Let's write the offer." The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistical violence. I hired movers who specialized in white glove service. They packed my books, my clothes, my dishes. I did not tell my parents I was moving. I did not post it on social media. I did not tell my aunts or my cousins, as far as they knew. I was still in the condo, sulking, being the villain. On the final day, the condo was empty. The floors were swept clean. The walls were bare. The ghost of Savannah's intrusion had been packed away with the dust bunnies. I stood by the front door, the new keys to the townhouse in my pocket. I looked at the shiny Medeco lock on the condo door one last time. It had served its purpose. It had held the line long enough for me to escape. Leo was waiting in the car downstairs. The engine was running. I stepped out into the hallway. I pulled the door shut. It clicked with a heavy, final sound. I did not look back. I walked down the hallway, past Mrs. Callahan's door. I slipped an envelope under her door. Inside was a thank you card and a gift certificate to the best steakhouse in the city. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out into the sunlight. My phone, tucked in my purse, was still on Do Not Disturb. I knew there were voicemails. I knew there were texts demanding to know why I hadn't shown up for Sunday dinner, why I wasn't answering the family group chat. They were screaming into the void. I got into Leo's car. "Ready?" he asked. "Drive," I said. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the building disappear in the side mirror. That building had been my pride. It had been the symbol of my independence. But symbols change. It had become a monument to my tolerance of their abuse. I was leaving it behind, along with the version of Leah who thought she had to earn her place in the world by suffering. We drove north, toward the iron gates and the guard booth, toward a house that no one in my family could find on a map. I was not just moving, I was vanishing. And for the first time in my life, being invisible felt like the ultimate power. The irony of removing yourself from a toxic ecosystem is that while you finally find peace, the system you left behind descends into chaos. For 34 years, I had been the structural support beam of the Martin family. I was the one who absorbed the stress, the one who wrote the checks, and the one who played the villain so everyone else could feel righteous. When I pulled that beam out, the roof did not just sag, it collapsed. I had been living in the townhouse at Emerald Hills for 3 weeks. My life was a series of quiet, luxurious routines. I drank coffee in my private courtyard without checking my phone for crisis alerts. I worked without the nagging fear of a sudden emergency withdrawal. The silence was absolute, and it was addictive. But outside the high brick walls of my new community, the noise was deafening. Since they could not reach me, my phone numbers were blocked. My address was a secret. And my email filters were set to military-grade strictness. My family did what they always did when they lost control. They took the battle to the court of public opinion. Leo was my window into the madness. He had not blocked them. He claimed it was for security monitoring, but I suspected he derived a dark sense of entertainment from watching the implosion. "You are trending in the tri-state area," Leo said one evening, scrolling through his phone while I chopped vegetables for dinner. "According to your Aunt Janice, you are not just a bad cousin, you are the symbol of corporate greed." He showed me a screenshot of a Facebook post. It was a long, rambling diatribe written by Savannah, accompanied by a selfie of her looking tearful in a car. "Some people let money turn their hearts to stone." The caption read, "I was promised a safe haven. I was told I had a home. But when you trust people who care more about granite countertops than human beings, you end up betrayed. Homeless again because of a technicality. Please pray for me and my baby cat." The comments section was a predictable cesspool of sympathy from people who did not know the whole story. Relatives I hadn't seen in a decade chimed in. "Disgraceful," wrote a second cousin from Ohio. "Family helps family. So sad when people get a little money and forget where they came from," wrote a great aunt. "They were painting a portrait of me as a miserly dragon sitting on a pile of gold, refusing to let the shivering peasants in. They called me rich but heartless. They said I had abandoned my roots, but the cracks in their narrative began to show the moment the performative sympathy had to be converted into actual action. It started, inevitably, with Savannah's living situation. After being escorted out of my condo by the police, Savannah had assumed that the family would rally around her. She expected a bidding war for the honor of hosting her. She thought my parents would take her in, or Aunt Janice would clear out a room. But my parents had downsized to a 2-bedroom condo 3 years ago, and my father used the second bedroom as his man cave. Aunt Janice lived in a strict 55-plus community that did not allow long-term guests under a certain age. Suddenly, Savannah was not a martyr to be pitied. She was a logistics problem to be solved, and without Leah the fixer to pay for an Airbnb or sign a lease, the problem landed squarely in their laps. Leo showed me a group chat log that had been leaked to him by my cousin Mark. Mark was the black sheep of the family, mostly because he refused to attend Thanksgiving and openly mocked my mother's pretension. The chat was titled, "Emergency Family Meeting, Savannah So. I am currently sleeping on Jessica's couch, but she says I have to leave by Friday because her boyfriend is moving back in. I really need a place to crash. Guys, just for a month or two until I manifest a new apartment. Aunt Janice." "Oh, honey, that is terrible. If only Leah hadn't been so cruel. Have you tried asking your Uncle Bob?" "Uncle Bob? Whoa, hold on. We have the dogs. Savannah is allergic. Plus, the guest room is full of storage boxes. Mom, we would love to have you. Savvy, you know that. But your uncle needs his office space, and the HOA is so strict about guests. Maybe Cousin Emily has room. Cousin Emily, I have 3 kids and 1 bathroom. Unless Savannah wants to sleep in the tub. That is a no-go." I read the exchange with a dry, humorless smile. It was a masterclass in deflection. Everyone loved Savannah when supporting her cost them nothing but a Facebook comment. But the moment she needed a bed, a key, or a sandwich, suddenly everyone had allergies, strict HOAs, or full houses. They loved the idea of helping her. They hated the reality of it. Then, the narrative started to unravel. In the chat, Savannah grew desperate. Savannah: "I don't understand. Leah promised me I could stay at her place. She literally said it was fine. Now I am on the street because you guys won't help me fight her lawyers." That was when Mark, my cynical cousin, entered the chat. "Mark, wait a second. If Leah promised you the place, why did she call the cops? Leah is a lot of things, but she is not a liar. And didn't you post a video saying it was your sanctuary, Savannah? She changed her mind. She is bipolar or something. And yes, it was practically mine because she never uses it, Mark. So let me get this straight. It wasn't yours. You didn't have a lease. And now that you got kicked out of the place you were squatting in, you want one of us to let you squat with us, Aunt Janice? Mark, be nice. She is in crisis." "Mark, she is always in crisis. Aunt Janice, And usually, Leah pays for it. But Leah is gone. So, who is writing the check this time? You silence. I could almost hear the notifications pinging in empty rooms across the city. Mark had said the quiet part out loud. He had pointed out the elephant in the room. I was the bank. And the bank was closed. The chat log continued. But the tone had shifted. The blind support was replaced by awkward excuses. People started leaving the group chat. Uncle Bob has left the conversation. Cousin Emily has left the conversation. Then came the moment that truly shocked me. It was my Uncle Steve. Steve was my father's older brother, a man of few words who had worked in construction his whole life. He rarely got involved in the drama. He just drank his beer and watched football. But apparently, even Steve had a limit. In response to a long, weeping voice note from Savannah about how the universe was testing her spirit, Uncle Steve typed a single sentence. Uncle Steve, you are 27 years old. Savannah, adults pay their own rent. Stop blaming your cousin and get a job. The explosion that followed must have been nuclear. According to Mark, Aunt Janice called Steve screaming. My mother tried to mediate and ended up crying. Savannah accused Steve of toxic masculinity, but the damage was done. The united front against the evil Leah had fractured. Without me there to absorb the toxicity, they were turning on each other. My mother couldn't blame me for Savannah's homelessness anymore because Savannah was currently asking her for money. Aunt Janice couldn't blame me for Savannah's distress because the family was refusing to help. The hypocrisy was laid bare. They didn't really care about Savannah's well-being. They just wanted someone else to handle her so they didn't have to. 2 days later, I received a letter at my office. It was marked personal and confidential. I recognized the handwriting. It was Uncle Steve. I opened it with a letter opener, half expecting a summons or a threat. Instead, I found a single sheet of lined notebook paper. Leah, I heard you bought a new place. Good for you. Don't tell them where it is. They are running around like headless chickens now that you cut the purse strings. Mark told me what really happened with the locks. You did the right thing. Savannah needs to grow up, and your parents need to stop enabling her. Enjoy the peace and quiet. Uncle Steve. P.S. If you need any work done on the new place, call my guy in the city. He won't tell anyone. I sat in my office chair, staring at the note. I felt a lump form in my throat. I had assumed I was alone. I had assumed that every single one of them viewed me as the enemy. I thought I had to burn the entire family tree to the ground to survive. But I realized then that silence is not just a shield. It is a filter. By stepping back, by refusing to engage, I had allowed the truth to float to the surface. The people who just wanted to use me were screaming. But the people who actually respected me, Mark, Uncle Steve, were nodding in approval. They had been silent before because the noise of the drama was too loud. They hadn't wanted to fight the wave of my mother's hysteria. But now that I had stopped fueling the wave, they could speak. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. That evening, I was sitting on my patio with Leo. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn of the townhouse complex. My dad tried to call you today, Leo said, not looking up from his book. Oh, I took a sip of my wine. What did he want? He wanted to know if I knew where you were, Leo said. He said it is urgent. Apparently, Savannah's car got repossessed yesterday because she missed 3 payments. She needs $2,000 to get it out of the impound lot. And he wanted to know if I could ask you to loan it to him. He said he would pay you back. I laughed. It was a genuine, belly-deep laugh. He wants to borrow money from the daughter he disowned last week to bail out the niece who broke into her house. That sums it up, Leo said, grinning. What did you tell him? I told him that I'm just a lowly architect and I don't get involved in the finances of high-powered independent women, Leo said. And then I told him that the reception was breaking up and hung up. I swirled the wine in my glass. They are panicking, I said. The wheels are coming off. They are realizing that family obligation was just a fancy word for Leah pays for everything, Leo corrected. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For years. They held the power because I wanted their love. They could threaten to withhold it, and I would pay up. But now, I didn't want their love. I had realized their love was a counterfeit currency, printed on blank paper and backed by nothing. And because I didn't want it, they had nothing to trade. They were bankrupt. I was the one with the assets. I was the one with the peace. I was the one with the unlisted address and the heavy oak door that locked from the inside. "Are you going to answer them?" Leo asked. Eventually. I thought about it. I thought about Savannah sleeping on a different couch every night. I thought about my mother wringing her hands because she couldn't fix it. I thought about my father's pride crumbling as he realized he couldn't afford to be the patriarch he pretended to be. "No," I said. Leo looked at me. Not even to say, "I told you so." "Especially not then," I said. Silence was my strongest weapon. Every time I didn't answer, they had to sit with their own mess. Every time I didn't fix it, they had to face the consequences of their own enabling. If I argued, I gave them a target. If I explained, I gave them something to twist. But my silence was a mirror, and they hated what they saw in it. "I am going to change my number," I said suddenly. "The cell number. I block them, but they can still leave voicemails that clutter up my storage. I want a clean slate." "That is a hassle," Leo warned. "You have to update all your accounts." "It is worth it," I said. "I want to be unreachable. I want to be a ghost." I looked at the high brick wall surrounding our garden. Somewhere out there, Savannah was probably writing another Facebook post about how cruel the world was. Somewhere, my mother was probably screaming at my father. But here, the only sound was the wind in the leaves and the clink of ice in a glass. I had lost a family. Yes, but I had found the truth, and looking at Uncle Steve's note in my pocket, I realized I hadn't lost everyone. I had just filtered out the parasites. "To being a ghost," I said, raising my glass. Leo clinked his glass against mine. "To haunting them with your happiness." I drank. The wine was cool and crisp. It tasted like freedom. The meeting was arranged through a channel I had not anticipated. My father did not try to bypass the digital wall I had erected. Instead, he sent a handwritten letter to Leo's architecture firm. It was sealed in a thick, cream-colored envelope, the kind he usually reserved for wedding checks or condolence cards. Leo had brought it home 2 nights ago, placing it on the kitchen island with a wary expression. "He wants to meet," Leo had said. "Just him. No mom, no Savannah. He says he will meet you anywhere you choose. For 15 minutes. He promised he would not yell." I had stared at the envelope for a long time. The handwriting was familiar, the sharp, slanted script of a man who had signed my report cards and my birthday checks, but it felt like an artifact from a different life. Part of me wanted to burn it. Part of me wanted to maintain the silence that had become my shield. But curiosity is a heavy anchor, and perhaps, beneath the anger, there was a small, stubborn hope that one of them might actually see me. So I agreed. We met on a Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop 3 miles from my office. It was neutral ground corporate, impersonal, and filled with strangers focused on their laptops. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth facing the door, my back against the wall. This was not a family reunion. It was a negotiation, and I needed to see him coming. When he walked in, the first thing I noticed was how much smaller he looked. My father had always been a large man, not just in stature but in presence. He was the voice that boomed at Sunday dinners, the authority that settled disputes with a wave of his hand. But the man who hesitated in the doorway of the coffee shop looked shrunken. His shoulders were slumped forward in a permanent shrug of defeat. His gray hair, usually combed back with military precision, was slightly disheveled. He wore a windbreaker that looked 2 sizes too big. He scanned the room, squinting against the afternoon sun. When his eyes found mine, he did not smile. He just nodded, a curt, somber acknowledgement, and walked toward the booth. He did not try to hug me. He did not try to kiss my cheek. He simply slid into the seat opposite me, placing his hands on the table. They were shaking slightly. "Leah," he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "Dad," I replied. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this. I had promised myself I would not be the daughter seeking approval. I was the woman who owned her own home and her own life. He looked down at his hands. You look good. You look rested. I am, I said. It is amazing how much better you sleep when you aren't waiting for a crisis call at 2 a.m. He flinched. The barb landed, but he didn't argue. He signaled the waitress and ordered a black coffee. I had a green tea in front of me that I hadn't touched. Your mother is still furious, he said. He didn't lead with small talk. He went straight to the source of the infection. She spends half the day crying and the other half screaming at me. She says you have been brainwashed. She says Leo turned you against us. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest. The instinct to defend Leo, to explain myself, to scream that I had a brain of my own, but I took a breath. I let the heat dissipate. I am not here to talk about Mom, I said calmly. And I am not here to talk about Leo. If you want to use these 15 minutes to relay her insults, I will leave right now. I made a move to slide out of the booth. No, he said quickly, reaching out a hand as if to stop me, though he didn't touch me. No, please, sit down. I settled back into the seat. Then tell me why you are here, because if it is to ask for money for Savannah's car, the answer is no. He let out a long, ragged sigh. He rubbed his face with both hands, dragging the skin down, revealing the red rims of his eyes. I did not come for money, he said. Steve told me what he said to you. He told me he wrote to you. Uncle Steve has more sense than the rest of you combined, I said. He does, my father admitted. He called me a coward. Leah, my own brother, called me a coward to my face. He said I let Caroline, your mother, run the family off a cliff because I was too scared to grab the wheel. He looked up at me then, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes took me by surprise. There was no bluster, no defensive anger, just a deep, aching exhaustion. He was right, my father said. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. The noise of the espresso machine faded into the background. What did you say? I asked. I said he was right, my father repeated. I am a coward. I have been a coward for 30 years. He picked up a sugar packet and began to turn it over and over in his fingers, staring at it intensely. When your mother told me she gave Savannah the key, he said quietly, I knew it was wrong. I knew it immediately. I felt it in my gut. I told her, Caroline, you cannot do that. Leah will be furious. It is her house. But she steamrolled me. She started talking about how hard Savannah has it, and how we have to be charitable, and if I didn't agree, then I was heartless too. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, not forgiveness. It is just easier to say yes to her. Leah, it has always been easier to say yes than to fight her. If I say no, I have to listen to days of silence, or yelling, or guilt. If I say yes, she is happy, the house is quiet. So I said yes. I went over there and I changed the lock because she told me to. I broke into your home because I wanted peace in mine. I sat there, stunned. For my entire life, I had viewed my parents as a monolith, Mom and Dad, a two-headed entity that made decisions in unison. I had assumed he agreed with her. I had assumed he thought I was selfish too. But the truth was far more pathetic. He didn't think I was selfish. He just didn't care enough about my boundaries to protect them. He had sacrificed me to appease her. I was the offering he placed on the altar of his marriage to keep the volcano from erupting. You traded my safety for your comfort, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Yes, he whispered. I did. He dropped the sugar packet. He put his hands flat on the table again. I am sorry, Leah. The words hung in the air between us. I had waited 34 years to hear those words. I had fantasized about them. In my head, the apology was always dramatic. There were tears. There was groveling. There was a grand speech about how I was the best daughter in the world, but this apology was quiet. It was small. It was just a tired old man admitting he had failed. "I am sorry I let her take the key," he continued. "I am sorry I called you that night and threatened you. I didn't mean it. I was scared. The police were there, and your mother was screaming, and I just wanted it to stop. I lashed out at you because you were the only one I could control, or I thought I could." I felt a lump in my throat. It was a heavy, watery sadness. It wasn't the sharp pain of betrayal anymore. It was the dull ache of seeing your parent as a flawed human being. He wasn't a villain. He was just weak. "I appreciate you saying that," I said softly. "It means something to me." "Does it mean you will come back?" he asked. There was a desperate edge to his voice now. "Your mother. She won't apologize. You know that. She can't. She doesn't know how to be wrong. But if you just came to dinner, if you just unblocked her number, we could pretend this didn't happen. We could move on." I looked at him, and I felt a wave of pity. He still didn't get it. He was still trying to find the path of least resistance. He wanted me to come back and resume my role as the shock absorber so he wouldn't have to deal with her alone. "No, Dad," I said. He slumped back, the hope draining out of his face. "I can't come back," I said, "because moving on means pretending you didn't violate my trust. It means pretending that Savannah didn't try to steal my life. I am not doing that anymore. I am not playing the game where we sweep the broken glass under the rug and walk on it barefoot." "So this is it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You are just gone. You left the family." "I didn't leave the family," I said. I leaned forward, looking him directly in the eyes. "I just locked the door." He stared at me, processing the words. "The door is locked," I repeated. "That doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I'm never going to speak to you again. But it means you don't get to walk in whenever you want. You don't get to bring your chaos into my living room. If you want to see me, you knock. And you wait for me to open it. And if you bring Mom's drama with you, the door stays shut." He was silent for a long time. He took a sip of his coffee. His hand was shaking so much the cup rattled against the saucer when he put it down. "She won't like that," he said. "I know," I said. "But that is not my problem to solve anymore. That is yours." He nodded slowly. He understood. For the first time, he was realizing that the burden of managing his wife's emotions had been returned to him. The sender. "What about Savannah?" he asked after a moment. "She is staying with a friend from college, but they are kicking her out on Friday. She has no car. She has no money. She is really in a bad way. Leah." "Did she ask about me?" I asked. He hesitated. She is angry. So she hasn't asked how I am," I said. "She hasn't apologized for lying to the police about a baby. She hasn't offered to pay for the locksmith. She doesn't have any money," he argued weakly. "It costs $0 to say, 'I am sorry,'" I said. "It costs $0 to take ownership." I took a sip of my tea. It was cold, but it felt cleansing. "Here is the truth, Dad," I said. "Savannah is 27. She is not a child. As long as you and Mom and Aunt Janice keep throwing pillows under her every time she falls, she is never going to learn how to stand up. You aren't helping her. You are crippling her. So we just let her hit the ground." "Yes," I said. "You let her hit the ground, and when she is ready to pick herself up, when she gets a job, when she starts taking responsibility, then maybe I will meet her for coffee. But until then, my wallet is closed, and my home is off limits." My father looked at me with a strange expression. It was a mix of fear and something else, respect. He had spent his life surrounded by women he felt he had to manage or appease. His wife, his sister, his niece, they were all emotional hurricanes. But sitting across from him was a woman who was calm, unmoving, and absolute. He realized then that he hadn't raised a compliant daughter. By pushing me too far, he had forged a matriarch. "You have changed," he said. "I had to," I replied. I checked my watch. That is 15 minutes. I stood up. I didn't wait for him to dismiss me. I didn't wait for his permission. He stood up too, awkwardly. He looked like he wanted to hug me, but he held back. He respected the boundary. "Will you call me?" he asked. "Just me. Not your mother." I looked at him. I saw the loneliness in his eyes. I saw the man who was trapped in a house with a woman who refused to hear no. And I realized he was the one who had to live in the prison he helped build. I had escaped. He was serving a life sentence. "I will call you," I said. "On Tuesdays. If you are alone." He nodded, gratitude washing over his face. "Okay, Tuesdays. I can do that." "And Dad?" I said, as I turned to leave. "Yeah. Tell Mom I am happy," I said. "Tell her I am really, truly happy." He looked down at the floor. "I don't think she wants to hear that." "Tell her anyway," I said. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright, sharp sunlight of the afternoon. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a heavy, quiet sadness for the relationship I would never have. I would never have the father who protected me. I would never have the mother who celebrated me. But as I unlocked my car door, I realized the sadness was manageable. It was a clean wound, not a festering infection. I had looked my father in the eye, and I had not blinked. I had heard an apology, and I had accepted it without selling my soul for more. I started the engine. I checked my phone. There was a text from Leo. "How did it go?" I typed back. "The door is locked, but I kept the key." I drove home to Emerald Hills, to the house with the gate and the guard. I knew my father would go home to the shouting and the chaos. I knew Savannah was somewhere complaining about her fate, but I was going home to silence. And for the first time, I understood that silence wasn't an absence of sound. It was the presence of peace. The war was over. I had surrendered nothing, and I had won myself. The brass hook was screwed into the wall right next to the heavy mahogany door of the townhouse. It was a small piece of hardware, perhaps 2 inches long, antique bronze, simple and sturdy. I stood there in the foyer, the afternoon light spilling through the high transom window, and I held my key ring in my hand. There were only 2 keys on it. One was for the front gate of the Emerald Hills community, the one that required a code and a wave to the guard, Marcus. The other was for this door. I reached out and hung the keys on the hook. The metal made a soft, deliberate chink sound against the brass. Next to my keys, there was only one other set, Leo's. There were no spare keys hidden under a rock. There was no emergency key given to a mother who believed boundaries were suggestions. There was no key floating around in a cousin's purse, waiting to be used as a weapon of entitlement. I stared at the 2 sets of keys hanging side by side. It was a minimalist image, almost stark in its simplicity. To anyone else, it was just a key rack. To me, it was a declaration of independence. It was physical proof that I had finally curated my life down to the people who actually respected the lease, both the literal one and the emotional one. It had been 3 months since the incident at the condo. 3 months since I had watched the police escort Savannah out of my life. 3 months since I had looked my father in the eye and told him the terms of engagement had changed. The silence in the townhouse was different from the silence in the hotel room in Mexico. That silence had been defensive, a barricade against the noise of their demands. This silence was expansive. It was the silence of a library or a cathedral. It was a space where I could hear my own thoughts without the static of guilt interfering. I walked into the kitchen. It was open and airy, smelling of the lemon basil candle I had lit earlier. My phone sat on the counter. For years, that device had been a source of low-level chronic anxiety. Every buzz, every ping, every vibration had triggered a Pavlovian response of dread. What do they need now? How much will it cost? Who is mad at me now? The phone was just a tool. I had changed my number, just as I told Leo I would. The only people who had the new digits were Leo, my doctor, the security gate, and my father. My mother did not have it. Savannah certainly did not have it. I picked it up and checked the time. It was 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. "He will be here in 10 minutes, I said to the empty room. My father was punctual. That was one thing I could say for him. When he wasn't being managed by my mother's chaos, he was a man who respected a clock. True to form, at 10 minutes past 4, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Martin is here for you. Ms. Leah," Marcus the guard said over the speaker. "Send him in. Marcus, thank you." I went to the door and unlocked it. I did not leave it unlocked. I opened it only when he arrived on the porch. My father stood there. He was wearing a clean polo shirt and holding a small white bakery box. He looked nervous, as he always did on Tuesdays. It was a strange dynamic, seeing your parent look at you with the apprehension of a student visiting the principal's office. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Leah," he nodded. "I brought those almond croissants you like, from the bakery on 4th. "Thank you. Come in." He stepped inside. He wiped his feet on the mat thoroughly, almost aggressively. He was terrified of tracking dirt into my sanctuary. It was a performance of respect, clumsy but sincere. We sat in the living room. We did not talk about Mom. We did not talk about Savannah. Those were the terms of the treaty. If he mentioned them, the visit ended. Instead, we talked about the weather. We talked about his golf game. We talked about the book I was reading. "The garden looks good," he said, gesturing to the courtyard visible through the glass doors. "Those hydrangeas are coming in." "Leo planted them," I said. "He has a green thumb." "Good man. Leo," my father said. He took a sip of the coffee I had poured him. He used a coaster. He checked twice to make sure he was using the coaster. It was a shallow relationship in many ways. We were skimming the surface, avoiding the deep waters where the monsters lived, but it was safe. And for now, safe was enough. "I heard," he started, then stopped. He looked at me, gauging the danger. "I heard from Steve that you got a promotion." "I did," I said. "Director of Finance. That is wonderful. Leah, I am proud of you." He said it quietly, without the usual follow-up of "so you can afford to help your cousin." He just said he was proud. I felt a small warmth in my chest. It wasn't the blazing sun of validation I used to crave, but it was a candle flame. It was real. "Thanks, Dad." He stayed for exactly 45 minutes. He ate one croissant, he drank one cup of coffee, and then he stood up. "I should get back," he said. "Traffic." "Okay," I said. I did not ask him to stay for dinner. I did not ask how Mom was doing. Even though I knew he was going back to a house filled with her resentment, I walked him to the door. "See you next Tuesday?" he asked. "Next Tuesday," I confirmed. I watched him walk to his car. He looked back once, waved, and then got in. As he drove away, I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. Click. The sound was final, but not angry. I went back to the kitchen and cleaned up the 2 coffee cups. I wiped the crumbs from the table. Leo walked in a few minutes later, home from the firm. He saw the bakery box. "Tuesday visit?" he asked, dropping his bag on the bench. "Tuesday visit," I agreed. He brought croissants. "Is he still behaving?" "He wiped his feet for 30 seconds, I said. "And he didn't mention the S word." Savannah. We didn't say her name often, but I knew she was still out there, spinning her web. Leo, who still monitored the family gossip channels occasionally, had told me she was now branding herself as a survivor of toxic family dynamics on TikTok. She was telling stories about how her wealthy, narcissist cousin had thrown her and her emotional support animal onto the street in the dead of winter. She was getting likes. She was getting sympathy. In the past, that would have driven me insane. I would have wanted to post receipts. I would have wanted to show the world the police report, the emails, the truth. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot control the narrative in someone else's head. You can only control who has access to your reality. Savannah could tell the world I was a monster. Let her. The people who mattered, Leo, Mrs. Callahan, Uncle Steve. My boss knew who I was, and more importantly, I knew who I was. "I have something I need to do," I told Leo. Before we start dinner. I walked into my home office. It was a room that was entirely mine. No guest bed, no stored boxes for relatives, just my desk, my books, and a small wall safe hidden behind a painting. I dialed the combination. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, there were important papers, the deed to the townhouse, our passports, my birth certificate, and there was a small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch and tipped it upside down. A key slid out into my hand. It was a standard house key with a blue plastic cap on the head. It was the spare key to my old condo, the one my mother had claimed she lost, the one she had actually given to Savannah. Mrs. Callahan had found it, on that night, after the police had forced Savannah to leave. Mrs. Callahan had found this key on the kitchen counter where Savannah had abandoned it. She had mailed it to me along with the final receipt, with a sticky note that said, "Thought you might want to bury this." I held the key in my palm. It felt light, insignificant. It was just a piece of cheap metal, but it represented 34 years of my life. It represented every time I had said yes when I wanted to say no. It represented every dollar I had thrown into the black hole of my family's dysfunction. It represented the version of Leah who believed she had to buy her way into her own family's hearts. That Leah was gone. She had died the moment she hung up the phone in Mexico and called the police. I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She had tried so hard. "You did your best," I whispered to the key. "But you were fighting a war you couldn't win." I placed the key back into the velvet bag. I placed the bag in the very back of the safe, behind a stack of bonds. I wasn't going to throw it away. I was going to keep it, not because I would ever use it. The lock it opened didn't even exist anymore, but because I needed to remember. I needed to remember that my kindness had been weaponized. I needed a reminder that when you give someone a key to your life without vetting them first, they will eventually change the locks on you. I closed the safe. I spun the dial. Leo was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me. "Buried?" he asked. "Archived," I corrected. "History is important. You have to study it so you don't repeat it." We walked out to the kitchen together. I started pulling ingredients out for dinner. We were making risotto. It was a dish that required patience, constant stirring, and attention. It was the kind of cooking I loved now, slow, deliberate, rewarding. "Leah," Leo said, leaning against the counter as I chopped an onion. "Yeah. What if something real happens?" I stopped chopping. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if it isn't a lie about a baby or a car payment or a drama?" Leo said. "What if your mom actually gets sick? What if your dad ends up in the hospital? What if they really, truly need you?" It was the question that lived in the back of my mind. It was the last tendril of guilt that tried to curl around my heart at night. What if I looked at the knife in my hand? I looked at the beautiful, peaceful home I had built. I thought about my father wiping his feet on the mat. "If they need me," I said slowly, choosing my words with the precision of a contract lawyer, "and they ask me with respect, I will be there." I turned to look at Leo. "I am not a monster. Leo, I don't want them to suffer. If my mother is sick, I will make sure she has the best doctors. If my father needs care, I will write the check. I will manage the logistics." I paused. "But I will not set myself on fire to keep them warm. I will help them as a daughter, not as a victim. I will help them from this side of the door." "From this side of the door," Leo repeated. "I like that." "The door isn't bricked up," I said. "It is just locked. When they learn how to knock properly without demands, without entitlement, without trying to break it down, I will open it. I will always open it for family. But they have to be family first, and parasites second." I went back to chopping the onion. "Family isn't a right of access," I said, the realization settling into my bones like the foundation of the house. "They thought because we shared DNA, they owned the servers. They thought they had admin privileges to my life. But they don't. They are users, and users can be banned." Leo laughed. He came over and kissed me on the temple. "Director of Finance," he teased, always with the metaphors. "It is all about asset management," I said, smiling, "and my peace is the most valuable asset I have." We cooked dinner in the quiet kitchen. We ate in the courtyard, under the stars, with the sound of the wind in the trees. My phone was inside, silent. My email was empty. My front door was locked. I took a bite of the risotto. It was perfect, creamy, rich, and warm. I thought about Savannah, sleeping on a friend's couch, telling her story to a phone screen, waiting for the world to save her. I thought about my mother, sitting in her anger, waiting for an apology that would never come. I wished them well. I truly did. I hoped they found their own peace, but I wasn't going to deliver it to them. I had given them my keys once. I had given them my trust. And they had shown me exactly what they thought of me. Now, the keys were on the hook, and for the first time in my life, the person holding them knew exactly what they were worth. I raised my glass of wine to the night sky. "To the new lock," I whispered. "To the new lock," Leo echoed, and the silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Helena Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Leah's decision to lock the door on her family. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people. Your support means the world to us.